Morning everybody. Morning. Nice to see so many that made it today because of the floods. Great pleasure introducing our speaker for today, Cathie Sabin. She's a past president of the Lawn Tennis Association, and she's going to tell us some of her stories while travelling in that capacity, and also give us an insight into the game of tennis. So, Cathie.
Good morning everybody, and thank you very much for the invitation. I'm well aware that there are a number of people who are in here who have heard me speak before. So as long as you don't wave your hand and say you said that last time, or that's not what you said last time, then we'll be fine. So I just need to clarify one little thing at the very beginning. I was president of the Lawn Tennis Association, which is not Wimbledon, because people seem to think that it's all one big package. The Lawn Tennis Association is the national governing body, and therefore I was the ambassador of the whole of British tennis. Wimbledon is just 2 weeks of the year, the most amazing tennis tournament, and that's run by a committee of some of us, plus the All England Club. So all I will be talking about, well, I do a bit of Wimbledon as well, it's about British tennis and about the state of the game in the country at the moment. So tennis really is for everyone. But you'll realise as I go through what I'm talking about, it is all about the people. Yes, it's nice to have a court, but if we haven't got the people, then nothing's actually going to happen. So where do we start? I will actually own up to the fact that quite a few pictures are of my grandchildren, but we'll go down that route. So how many of you played tennis when you were at school? And how many of you absolutely hated the tennis lessons because all you did was pick up the balls, go round the back to collect the balls, your partner couldn't hit the ball to you, or they just wellied the ball at you, so you just hated it with a passion. The balls were hard, the courts were big, and it was always wet. So in the 70s it was decided the game, I don't know why that's doing that, but we'll give it a go and see if we can go back to where we were. Right. We decided that the game was not right for little children because they were playing with a racket that was only an inch shorter than somebody of my size, so they're having to carry it up here. So this is now the third size tennis racket, and the little children will play with this racket on a little court with a very soft ball, which means they can actually play. And until they can play all the shots that you see these top stars like top spin and slice and smash and serve and backhand and forehand, they won't progress to the next size. That's going to fall on the floor. Oh, thank you. Which is an orange ball, so it's a bit like a traffic light game, and the children will progress through the different sizes so that they're always comfortable at playing the game. What was the point of putting them on a huge court? They couldn't see over the net, and there was no success. So in the schools now, they will play the softer, shorter version of the game. And it isn't just about playing on a court. You can see there lots of brightly coloured plastic equipment, so that in a school you could have 30 children on one court and they could all be busy for the whole hour doing drills, doing practices. You don't have to be playing on a full-size court. Tennis for kids. If we don't engage with the children, the game is going to die. Now, I'm trying not to name drop, but when I was talking to the Queen, I was introduced as the chairman of the education group, and I said we were trying to develop the programme in schools. And she said, that's a very good idea, because that's where the children are. Absolutely right. So the programmes we've actually developed most have been within the schools. So the Tennis for Kids is on the back of winning the Davis Cup, and we decided we need to actually market the game much, much better. So there was a free programme for children. We won the Davis Cup in 2016. 70,000 children have started playing tennis since then because of this programme, when we trained the coaches, and it's all about fun. If you can't have fun, you're not going to go next week. Judy Murray, everybody knows Judy Murray, not necessarily her Strictly Come Dancing, but Judy Murray. She's very passionate about able to teach little girls in an appropriate way. So all her programmes are very pink and fluffy, and the girls tend to be taught on their own, and then they will merge in with the boys for later on. So she's been instrumental in girls' programmes. So where are they going to play? We had this large group of young girls who came to talk to us at the National Tennis Centre in Roehampton. And they were from a local school, and we sat them down with some of our senior colleagues at the LTA, all who happened to be girls. There was media, communications, marketing, legal, safeguarding, competitions. And we said to these girls, what jobs can you do in sport? Well, one of them said, well, you could be a ball boy. But we didn't think you'd actually earn a lot of money for life as a ball boy, or coach, or play. And they had no idea you could actually work in sport doing a great variety of jobs. So they went away thinking, oh yes, I can get my law degree and then work in sport. I don't have to be a really good performer. At the top you'll see a picture of Mr. Cameron and our friend Mr. Burke, who is a passionate tennis supporter. And when we've had schools programmes and offered schools the opportunity to visit London, he has always arranged for us to have Old Palace Yard. I don't know if you know Old Palace Yard, just underneath Big Ben. And we have a great jamboree of tennis. And the day we were there was a big debate about Iraq. And Mr. Burko left the chamber and came out to us in all his white gear. Mr. Cameron came later and said, you left the chamber. Well, yes, I had a more important thing to do. I had to come and see these children playing tennis. But he is passionate. So there are opportunities for children to learn about the wider world, not just tennis. And the group of people you can see in their Union Jack flags, I met in Rio. There was a little group of about 10 of them who followed the British players round the tennis courts, cheering them on very, very loudly. So I went across to see them. And it turned out that 5 of them were PE teachers. So when we get back to England, they were all invited on a course. They were given bags of equipment because they'd never done tennis in their schools. So you grab the opportunity to encourage these people whenever you possibly can. I said tennis really is for everyone. The top slide, people are wearing masks because they have a visual impairment. And in order to make it a level playing field, they have to be completely blindfolded. And you think, well, how on earth can they play? They play on a small court, and the lines are raised. And they will stand, and they will feel the lines with their feet, and then stand, and they scoop the ball, which will be like the foam ball, off the floor. And you have to be very, very quiet, because the balls have got bells inside. And my grandson was watching a match, and he said, Grandma, you're not allowed to cheer and shout, because they have to hear the ball. But just to watch them is quite amazing. Wheelchair players. We've got a very large group of wheelchair tennis players in Shropshire, based at the Shrewsbury Club. There's an amazing lady called Val Fisher who had a horse riding accident, went into hospital and decided that she really needed to do something. So she went to Stoke Mandeville to the games, and she did shot put and various other things, and then decided to play tennis. And within 3 years she was in the Paralympic squad for the Olympics, playing tennis. Quite a determined lady. So there's no reason why people who are in wheelchairs shouldn't play tennis. There's a young man who was born with his hands back to front, and he has no mobility at all other than one arm will move like this. And he plays, and he was actually ranked world number 2 at one time. Electric wheelchair, so he can move the knobs here. And you think, why would he choose to play tennis? So the one movement he's got with his one foot, he will roll the ball towards him, flick the ball in the air, and then hit the ball underarm, and then he whizzes around on his chair. Sadly though, some people complain that he has an advantage because he's got an electric chair. But he is quite phenomenal. And we said to him, why did you decide to play tennis? His answer was, why not? Why not? If you've never been able to play, then you wouldn't play. You're just going to get on with it and play. And then the young man on his knees has intellectual limitations. Large numbers of Down syndrome people are playing tennis, and they will play on a smaller court with a softer ball. And at the moment the Special Olympics are out in Abu Dhabi, and we do have a tennis squad out there. and they are just the most passionate, wonderful group of players. Large group in Telford, and most of our clubs in Shropshire now are engaging with different groups of disabilities, and they're just engaging. Because most of us will actually agree at our age that we have got something that's not working all as well as it used to. We may not be able to hear as well. We've got glasses on, or our knees are a little bit crank. So it's all a question of degrees. But for these groups, there are world championships, they can represent their country, and they have a marvellous time. So where are people going to play? Clubs. In Shropshire, the majority of people will play in clubs. If you live in London, the majority of people will play in parks. And some of the park sites in London have got more courts than any of our clubs. The park site overlooking Stratford, the Olympic Park, has got 24 courts. Well, we don't have any clubs that big, do we, in Shropshire? At all. The difficulty is the local authorities have got no money. So they locked the courts up, and the courts then started to break down. And of course, if something is locked, young people think, I'm going to climb in there. So then you get vandalism, and the courts are completely ruined. So a lot of the local authorities worked with us to help us open up the courts. I know when I was teaching, not so far away from here, we took the gates off the courts, and no one ever then went on and did any damage. We used to leave all that brightly coloured equipment on the courts overnight, but because there was no gate and there was no lock, it was all perfectly safe. And a lot of the local authorities now have a fob system, whereby a family might pay something like £30 for a whole year, and in Portsmouth a family can use any of their park courts for that fee, and the fob gets them into the courts. And because the courts are being used and there's a presence of people, the vandalism has stopped. So gone are the days when you had the old park keeper in his little hut, and if you went down to play tennis and he'd gone off, you couldn't play. Whereas now you've got your fob and you can go in. So the local authorities have saved money because they've got a little bit of money from the £30, and that goes into sinking funds to repair the courts later on. So local authorities are big, but in Shropshire it tends to be the clubs. The clubs are the heart, and the clubs are part of the counties. So for most people, they will want to play for their county, and you can see our men's county team proudly with the Team Shropshire banner there. And I expect some of you here would have played sports for your county, whether you were rowing or cricket or football or whatever. But to be able to say that you're a county player is still really very, very important. This group here, their site, this court, backs on to the Birmingham City Council rubbish collection depot. So it doesn't smell very nice. But the gentleman at the end on the left realised that there was nothing for the young people in Birmingham, that part of Birmingham. So they flattened the area and they got funding and they laid these courts. But the clever bit was, it was very, very windy and a bit smelly, and there was nowhere for the parents to sit and watch. He used to work for the bus company. So the bus company donated 3 bus shelters, which they painted and put alongside the courts, and of course they got a seat inside. They were free, and it meant that the parents had somewhere to sit, which meant the parents didn't mind going, so they would take their children. Young ladies, this is the group of people we have to focus on, because those young girls, they will move on. They happen to be the Middlesex County team who are the national champions. They will move on, but you've got to try and keep them in the game. And it's very, very difficult to keep girls in the game. Teenage girls will drop out very easily because there are other things to do. And teenage girls don't want to look hot and sweaty, sadly. I remember I used to get very hot and sweaty, but anyway, teenage girls don't. But also, there are other things to do. They might think they've got 20 minutes to exercise a week. So what will they do? They'll probably go for a run, or they'll go in the gym, or they'll spin. But to go to a tennis club to play a game of tennis, you've actually got to be really quite organised. So we have to focus on the girls, not to the detriment of the boys, but think about the girls. Now, some of you might recognise some of these people. I don't know if it's clear enough for you, but you've got Roger Taylor, Mark Cox, Anne Jones, Angela Mortimer, Roy Emerson, they were all kind of our era. And they lived a wonderful, wonderful life as professional tennis players. Anne Jones, when she won Wimbledon, won £25, which is slightly less than they get now, which is a few million. But she said it was okay because she was allowed to spend it anywhere she liked in lily whites. But £25. But the nice thing is that she's not bitter about the fact that they're earning so much money now. She said the lifestyle they had was so much more fun. And she travelled with all the Australians, Rod Laver, John Newcombe, Roach, and they used to set off from Australia after the Australian events in February, travel all through Europe, and it was just one big family, whereas now players will travel on their own. And particularly the girls, they're not very good about... They'll be friends with other players on the surface, but it's not so good when they're trying to build up friendships and relationships. The boys, they all muck in together. But the quote from one British player when she was asked about her experience on the tour as a world player was table for one. Because at night she could be anywhere in the world and she'd be eating on her own. There might be another player over there, but Cathie was on her own. And although they travel the world, you don't actually see the place you go to. Because you arrive at the airport, you train, you play a tennis match, and you fly out. So the experience of actually sightseeing doesn't really come into it. These are the people we need to look to, and they're all still involved, and in fact they're all still playing in world championships. Because you can play, there are world championships for the over 90s. And they are quite incredible. I have to say that the men wear lots of bandages. The ladies not quite so much, but the men do wear lots of bandages. But they are very, very cunning, particularly the more mature gentlemen. You know, there's a lot of slicing and drop shots. But you can play forever. And I know Roger coaches, and he says when the people come to him who are much older, he will say, let's play with a slightly softer ball. What's the point of putting yourself through agonies of not being able to hit this hard ball? Let's be sensible. You've got to have fun, play with a softer ball, and then you can come back and play again the following week. I was talking about the girls. All these girls here played on the tour. If you are not in the top 80 in the world as a girl player, you will not make a living. If you're in the top 110, 120 in the men, you will just about make a living. And that's hard when you compare that with the other sports like golf and football. They are living hand to mouth. So these girls have been going through a mentoring scheme and they're now top coaches. The little pram on the left, there was a girl who just had her baby, and the only way she could get back to coaching was to take the baby with her. So it was her new ball basket, happened to be the pram. But she said that was fine because he was quite happy. The person she was coaching was quite happy. But how do you manage or balance off the family with the coaching job? Because most of the coaching for young children is going to be from 3:30 till 7 o'clock, and that's when you've got your family. So it can be difficult. If you're at a big club like the Cumberland Club in London, you've got a creche. But most of our clubs are 2 courts. What do you do with your little ones? So it can be really quite difficult. My grandson's the one in blue. So how do you go from that to that? Performance pathway. It can be very expensive. Tennis on the whole is not expensive. People think it's white, middle class and expensive. But most people, most of the juniors, particularly in Shropshire, can be playing tennis for about 75, 80p a week. Well, they'll spend more than that on their mobile phone bill. If they are going to choose their performance route, then it's a complete lifestyle. And if you think of those 2 little boys, we would suggest that they don't have individual lessons, that they actually play as a group. And if you've got a really good coach, and I know we've got parents of coaches, hi Pauline, sitting in the audience, you can coach 3 small boys and they can hit as many balls in 1 hour as if you were coaching 1. Because if it's just you and one, half the time you're picking up the balls. But if you've got three, two can pick up while you're hitting one, and you all change round. And it's much more fun being with your friends. It used to be that parents would take their one child to a tournament, bring them back the next day to another tournament. We're trying to encourage them to go in groups, so they're not on their own, and they can learn to support each other, travel together. Travel together. Try it again. This is because, oh dear me. Isn't it good when you've got somebody who knows what they're doing?
Let's do it with the mic, the remote.
Yeah, I'll come down.
All right. There we are. Well done. Right. So to get from that starter game to this level, complete lifestyle, some parents sadly think that if you take your child out of school at 9, they're going to be a world champion. Well, they might be, but it's very, very unlikely, because 90% of the children who actually think they're performance players won't make the top 100. And unfortunately, some coaches will say, if you want to be world number 1, I'm your coach. You can't promise anything like that, because it's about the child, whether the child grows, whether they want to stay in the game. But some parents put a huge amount behind their children because they want the best for their child. And that's what you do, because they only get one chance of doing something, don't they? But you do see some sad stories of children who are taught by their mother. They travel with their mother. The mother looks after them, and they miss out on the relationships they might have within school. You know, the fun you have in the science lab when you're all mucking about a bit, when you shouldn't be, and the relationships and the friendships you get. And we would like to think that all the children have that experience. So we're trying to work more with some of the schools who've got tennis facilities, where they can support the good tennis players, but give them more of a natural life, natural environment. And some of the really good schools will actually modify their curriculum to support the sports people, whether they're tennis players or cricketers or footballers or whatever. And when I taught at Shifnal, we had all the FA national school boys. We adapted our curriculum, and all the teachers, we all knew that we would have to do some distance learning with the boys when they were off in Croatia playing football. We would send them with their homework, and hopefully it would come back done. It didn't always come back done, but at least we knew that was part of our responsibility, to make sure that we could do the sport and be part of the school environment. So that's obviously the Davis Cup, which was the most phenomenal moment for us. And then, of course, we've got the little girls. People talk about it being white middle class. It's not the case anymore. It might be in Shropshire, but that's the very makeup of our county, or most of our county. Whereas now the ethnic mix of people, of British people, is very, very diverse. And some of you will have heard about the Fed Cup team. The Fed Cup is the ladies' version of the Davis Cup, and we're playing Easter weekend in the Copper Box. We have got to win that to get into the World Group. But again, a passionate group of wonderful ladies. Fans. What would we do without our fans? And although some of you will say, oh, I don't know anything about tennis, I expect everybody has an opinion about Andy Murray. Whether you think he's a grumpy old whatever, or you think he's lovely. So these fans, these two pictures are in Glasgow. And the gentleman on the left, I went to talk to him, Argentinian. And he just fell in love with what the Scots were wearing. He has actually got a kilt on. I'm not sure if he really knew that he was actually going to be wearing a kilt. But we were playing Argentina in Glasgow, and Glasgow has proved that you can actually bring a whole city together behind sporting activity. And the gentleman on the right, they went to the Commonwealth Games, and they decided they would buy suits. And those suits now have been to every Davis Cup tie, so that's 2 ties a year. They've travelled the world following our British players, because they'd seen the Commonwealth Games and thought, oh, there's a tennis event called the Davis Cup, we'll go and have a look. So they're very obvious, they're very loud, but they are absolutely passionate. And all 4 live in London. And they decided they'd go and learn how to play tennis. And they now play 3 times a week on Hyde Park, and they absolutely love their tennis. So it was the seed sown at the Commonwealth Games that has inspired them to play. This group of people are from Suffolk, and they travel, and they've been to every Davis Cup tie for the last 8 years and every Fed Cup. It costs them a lot of money, but they have been extraordinary in the way they've supported us. And the lady in the middle with the big M on her, we had a tournament a few weeks ago at the Shrewsbury Club, and she travelled from Suffolk to help us out. So the fans out there are brilliant. The gentleman on the left, a gentleman called Ray Fletcher, he was 90 a fortnight ago. He's just been given an award by Tennis Shropshire for what he's done for us. He used to run all the stewards at the National Tennis Centre, at the Telford International Centre, when we had the tennis nationals. I don't know if any of you ever visited the tennis centre there, but there's a nod. Thank you very much. It was the biggest tennis centre in Europe at the time, and people like Nick played there, and our top players played there. Greg and Tim, Joe Jury, Andrew Castle, they all played there. Sadly, they could make more money on one court in a weekend from an exhibition than they could from tennis for a year. So it became an international exhibition centre, and it's very, very good, but this is what we're actually competing against. The other picture, the gentleman runs the Sterling Barmy Army. They're the very, very loud people who have all the chants, who go to all the tennis matches and create an amazing atmosphere. It's very, very loud. He's now 33, but he still runs the student Barmy Army. And the lady on the right, the Duchess of Gloucester, is the honorary president of the Lawn Tennis Association, and she also travels to all the events to support us. Very, very knowledgeable. And when you go to have meetings with her, she will say, what ranking is Dan Evans? How's Joe Conter doing? How are the young players? How's Jack Draper? And you have to be really on your toes and explain it all to her. We played in Serbia, and they'd dug out a court in a quarry. So the seating for the public was just, like carved blocks, no cushions. So people were very good, they sat there. Although when they arrived, they were warned that there was no toilet paper in the toilets. So they took the toilet paper with them. But it was confiscated when they went in, because in Serbia, apparently, football fans light toilet rolls and then throw them on the pitch. So that was confiscated. All the ladies had their makeup confiscated because they thought that mascara and lipstick were missiles. And then it rained. And they were sitting on these slabs, and of course the water just ran down the slab. They were very, very wet. And the Duchess had her waterproof coat on. We were all absolutely soaked. And we said, Ma'am, by all means go inside. If Kyle Edmund can play in the rain, I can sit in the rain, bless her. So she sat and watched all the way through. But she is very, very good at supporting what we want to do. Now you might recognise some of these people. We talk about volunteers, and I can bet that everybody in here does volunteering of some kind. For a start, you volunteered to come here. You weren't paid to come here today. And you've joined groups, you run groups. When we had this big event in Shrewsbury a few weeks ago, we knew that we needed to have lots of volunteers. So I wrote to all the clubs and said, if anybody'd like to come and help us, welcoming the players, stewarding. 83 people replied, which I thought if I got 20, I'd do really well. 83. We used everybody, and it was like a great big family. But I think the key was that they knew it was just for the 1 week. They gave me 2 days or 3 days, end of story. People, I don't think, want to go to committee meetings every month anymore. If you can actually do the messages by internet, WhatsApp, whatever else, they don't need to be going to long meetings. And they all want to do the next event. We had a wonderful time. Yes, a lot of them are tennis players, but a lot of them just wanted to be involved. So, absolutely key. 4 years ago, I thought we are not doing enough to recognise our volunteers. everybody in British tennis, because if we want British tennis to flourish, we've got to get all the people on board, whether they're the coaches, the parents. After all, it's the parents who decide whether they're going to take the children to the tennis. We've got to engage with everybody and say thank you. So we've started the British Tennis Awards, and anybody can nominate anybody for an award. So you might know somebody, for example, Tony Legg, who did an amazing job at Town Walls Tennis Club. We know these people who've done wonderful jobs. If you know somebody who's done a job, you can log on to the LTA website and nominate them for a county award. The winners of the county awards will then go to the regional setup, and the regional winners go to Wimbledon for a day for the national awards. And it's a bit like the Oscars. 3 or 4 people will have their citations read out, and some of them are quite incredible. And then the winners will be presented with their awards. And this was the very first one we had. Andrew Castle was our MC, and the Duchess of Gloucester did the presentations. And it's really good to see these people who say they don't do the job to be thanked. They do the job because they enjoy doing the job. We've got some amazing, amazing role models. I don't know if anybody would actually know who this gentleman is. His name's Gordon Reid. He's won multiple wheelchair Grand Slams, as has his friend Alfie Hewitt. Now, I thought I'd actually put different slides up about the next two. You recognise these two? Jamie and Andy. And I suppose because of the time that I was president, both the boys were playing exceptional tennis. And I was lucky enough to kind of ride on the back of all that, because it was the Olympics, it was Davis Cup, Wimbledon, it was Grand Slam wins. So the whole kind of euphoria about British tennis was because of the Murray boys. But when you talk to Andy, he will say, actually, yes, he hits the ball on the court, but if it wasn't for the people behind him, people like Nick Wheel, whose family are up there, who actually are there to support the players and to be there doing their strength and conditioning, their fitness training, their nutrition, their management, organising their travel, perhaps living with them as their wife. They cannot do it on their own. So he will talk about the team, and Andy will talk about the team who got him to win the Davis Cup, who won the other rounds. So it isn't all just about him. And he's a very, very gentle soul, but very, very private. Jamie is slightly different. Jamie here winning the Australian Open with his partner Bruno. And they didn't finish till 3 o'clock in the morning. We happened to be watching there. There weren't many of us left in the stadium when they won that trophy. But Andy, who'd got his final the next day, he said he couldn't cope with being in the hotel room. He came across and he was in the stand. And all Jamie could say was, "What are you doing there watching this match? You should be at home, you should be in the hotel sleeping." But they're very, very close as a pair of brothers, and they wanted to support each other. They give back a huge amount. This picture is of Jamie in Dunblane at the primary school where the shooting happened. It was his school. And when the Davis Cup was touring around the country, Jamie said he wanted to go back to his primary school. He'd just been made world number 1, so all these little children had got hats on which said, "Jamie world number 1" or "Jamie, we love you." And when Jamie walked on to the stage, he was carrying his replica Davis Cup, which is a magnificent silver trophy. But the children in the reception class had made their own Davis Cup. Bit wonky. So Jamie put his down and he carried their trophy for the rest of the morning. But he engaged with these young children. It was very difficult for him because he hadn't been back to the school since the disaster. But there were 2 ladies who had been in the same class as him during the shooting who were now teaching at the school. And it was a dynamic, vibrant school. And it was the first time that I'd been to a school assembly when the children came in singing. There were about 300 little children, and they were all singing their hearts out. Well, I don't think they call them standard ones, didn't have a clue what they were singing, because when you're only 5, you just sing, don't you? But they all singing, and they all come in, they all sit down, singing away. The head teacher then stood up and just went, and they all stopped. How many times have you been at school, even when you were at school, when you were all chatting away and they were trying to say, shh, shh, shh? Why would you make children walk in silence when they could sing, and then they were silent when they needed to be? So Jamie was doing his really good ambassadorial job there. Andy, the little boy Ethan, he's from Glasgow, and he wanted a day off school to come and watch the Davis Cup. He was 5. So his dad said, you have to go and see the head teacher. So he went to see the head teacher and explained that he wanted to be like Andy Murray, and he'd like to have a day off school, please. She said, well, I can't allow that, but if you're prepared to do a PowerPoint presentation to your class, you can have the day off. 5 years old. Okay, he says, I'm fine, that's okay. So off he goes, he takes photographs, he does the PowerPoint presentation for his class of 33 5-year-olds, and it was so good they said, we'll do it for the whole school. So he did it for the 300, and great style. And his last slide says, and I'm going to win the Davis Cup. He's now 12, and he is number 2 in the national Scottish squad, and is training at Stirling, which is just down the road from where Andy Murray's family grew up. And the picture of Andy there, it's an unusual picture. He's laughing and smiling. He'd just played a tiebreak against a 10-year-old boy and he'd won. And it was really quite close, and we were all saying, you know, to this little kid. But he's absolutely passionate, but he doesn't like the media. They can be very intrusive, and they do ask such silly questions, don't they? You know, you've just been absolutely thrashed. What do you feel like? Well, sometimes you feel as if they really ought to say to the press exactly what they do feel like, but they do tend to be quite polite, don't they? So all the time that I was president, I was engaging with these top players, which was a really, really special treat, but not forgetting all the people who actually do British tennis at a grassroots level. But part of my role is actually running the championships at Wimbledon. So this is a picture you won't normally see. The grass is Henman Hill, which is absolutely empty. And the picture on the right is the people who have queued overnight to get into Wimbledon, and they're corralled inside the gates, and then the stewards walk them into the ground. It's all about health and safety, isn't it? That if you don't do that, they'll all run. So the stewards who are at the front walk like this in front of them. But when you watch from above, the people who are in the know nip down the side alleys and round the back, because a lot of the seats, of course, are free and open stands, so they know where to go to get the best seats. So Wimbledon is the most extraordinary tennis tournament in the world, and people will say, which is my favourite? They're all very different. The US Open is very, very loud, very, very brash, but very exciting. And if you go to the US Open and you go to the Arthur Ashe Stadium and you sit at the top, you can't actually see whether it's a man or a woman playing, and you can't see whether the ball is being sliced over the net or it's a great high lob. So the quality of experience of watching at the top level is not so good. Whereas at the centre court, even the back row, you get a good view. The Australian Open is a lovely atmosphere. Again, it's a bit like a party. And I think some of you will remember that I said that on the middle Saturday, they have a Heineken day. And when you've bought 4 Heineken beers, you get a free hat. So by 11 o'clock, everybody's wearing a hat. So it is just a great big party. But the players do love the Australian Open. The French is very much tennis around a restaurant, and that if you want to eat a meal, they won't hurry, and hardly anybody goes to watch the tennis till 2 o'clock, even though it's been going on since 11 o'clock in the morning. So you'll have Roger Federer playing on court and nobody watching, because they're all having lunch. It's just priorities, isn't it? The Olympics, Rio, was just extraordinary, because you've got the wealth and you'd got extreme poverty. We went 2 days early. We'd been booked into the Trump Hotel. Won't say any more about that, but the fact that it wasn't finished didn't help. So they had to move our hotel, and when we arrived at the other hotel, it was full of smoke. And they were actually debugging because of the mosquitoes. There was a scare, wasn't there, about mosquitoes at the time. So we had to kind of fight our way through all the fog. And they said, why don't you go down to the beach just to see what it's like? So they said there's a bus transport to take you down to the river. So we got on this bus. Actually, it was a lorry. You just climbed on the back. We went down to the lagoon, got on this little boat, and they said, don't touch the water. So you sit with your hands inside. It looked lovely, but it was black. So we go across the lagoon, then we walk across to the beach. Unbelievable, beautiful sands, rolling sea. Lots of families, nobody in the water, because the water is polluted. And you think, gosh, that's just such a shame. Because even in this country, even in the North Sea or in Wales, you'll go in the sea, won't you? Well, yes, you might go in the sea. But you couldn't go in the sea there because it was polluted, because over the years the sewage had just flowed into the sea. Great shame. But the atmosphere was absolutely magic. And more people came to watch Andy Murray's final there against Del Potro. And they said they couldn't believe how gladiatorial the match was. Because it's one-on-one, you've got no support from your coaches. The fact that we had two rival lots of fans, Argentina and Brazil, who actually were fighting each other in the stand, that didn't help either. But people said, Usain Bolt wins a gold medal. How long does it take him? Less than 10 seconds. Andy Murray was nearly 4 hours, and it's the same gold medal. It's different, I know, but people were saying they had never really experienced such an extraordinary feat of endurance as Andy did when he was actually winning that Rio Olympic. So go back to Wimbledon again, and there are a few facts that might interest you. There are now 2 roofs on 2 of the courts, which will mean that the 42,000 people, 25 of who will actually be in the stadium, there will be live tennis on 2 courts all the time. So even if we do get a wet Wimbledon, you'll have 2 matches that you can actually watch, which will be really good, which means there's more space for the people who have ground passes to actually get into the food venues. Last year, at the end of every day, the food that's been left over, because once you've actually prepared a salad or a plate of food, you can't keep it till the next day. It has to be either thrown out, but we actually recycled it. So a company called City Harvest come in at midnight in their Pantechnicon and take away the waste food. And the waste food fed 25,000 homeless people, which we think is extraordinary. But we shouldn't be wasting that food. So you either feed the homeless or you save the waste. So we have a new IT system, so that every time you buy a sandwich, if it's a chicken sandwich, electronically it'll record that it was 1 ounce of chicken, 2 slices of tomato, a teaspoon of mayonnaise, 1 leaf of lettuce, 2 slices of bread and a little bit of butter. And that all adds up until somebody at the other end is reading the data and it says you need to order some more bread or some more chickens. So they're trying to manage the waste, because otherwise, yes, we can feed the homeless, but we should manage the waste in the first place. There are 330 chefs just cooking. It's the biggest outside catering event in Europe. How many people have actually been to Wimbledon? Oh, right, so you know what I'm talking about. I expect some of you haven't been for a while, but if you've been recently, it is quite a slickly run event. And there are 8,000 people on duty any one day working at the tournament. We sell 330,000 cups of tea, 320,000 glasses of Pimm's. Pimm's can be a problem because we all know that Pimm's is alcoholic, but in fact, people from the Far East, they just think it's a long, soft drink. And the Japanese have been known to be slightly merry when they've had their third Pimm's because they're not quite used to drinking the alcoholic drinks. 28 tonnes of strawberries. And they come in every night from Kent. Underneath number 1 court is an area big enough for the height for 2 double-decker buses. And all the food is brought in between midnight and 3 o'clock. And then there are 50 people who just hull strawberries for the next day. I won't tell you how much they cost because I'm going to ask you that in the quiz in a minute. Most of our recycling is done on the site, and 85% of the food we use is from a short distance away from the grounds because we're very aware about the footprint and the damage. There are a few things that we need to buy from abroad, but they've already planned that if this awful B word happens and we can't get hold of whatever we need from Spain, then we have to change the menus, but they've planned all that ahead. So I'm going to actually ask you now to do a little quiz. Some of the answers I've actually given you. And I'm going to ask you a question, and if you think the answer is heads, you've got to put your hands on your heads. And it should be tails, but I suggest you put your hands on your knees. So, we have a practice. Okay, it doesn't matter if you get this one wrong. So the first question is, in what year did Fred Perry last win Wimbledon? If you think it was 1932, you put your hand on your head. If you think it was 1936, you put your hand on your knees. So, in what year did Fred Perry last win Wimbledon? 1932 or 1936? Go on, be brave. If you have your hands on your knees, you are correct. So that would mean that all the people with their hands on their heads would be out. Right. So, let's just go through a few questions, and there is a little prize for the person who managed it last until the end. Okay, which Grand Slam event is held last in the calendar year? If you think it's the US Open, you put your hands on your head. If you think it's the Australian Open, you put your hands on your knees. So, US Open, Australian Open. If you have your hands on your heads, you are still in. You need to check on the person next to you that they're not cheating, please. I hope that you all understand the scoring system in tennis. In the epic match between John Isner and Nicholas Mahut in 2010, what was the score in the final set? If you think it was 70-68, put your hands on your head. If you think it was 60-58, you put your hands on your knees. So 70-68, 60-58. Heads is correct, 70-68. And it's because of that match and because of the long matches last year that we've changed the rules, and now when you get to 12 all in the fifth set, there'll be a tie break. Because it wasn't fair for the players. The players need to know how long they're going to have to be on court. And it actually ruined the final last year when Kevin Anderson had to play such a long semi-final. So we have adapted the rules accordingly. How much is a portion of strawberries and cream at Wimbledon? Hands on your heads for £3.50. Hands on your knees for £2.50. £3.50. £2.50. £2.50. It gets them every time. It's what's called a loss leader, because we get so much flack from the media about people having to get a mortgage out to have strawberries and cream. We've kept the same price for a long time. So do we have anybody left? Yes, we do. Okay, the next question. Roland Garros is the French Open. The name of the street in which it is held, if it's called Avenue Roland Garros, you put your hand on your head. if it's called Avenue Gordon Bennett, you put your hands on your knees. So, Avenue Roland Garros or Avenue Roland Bennett. It's actually Gordon Bennett. So, do we have anybody left? Yes? Well done. Right. Can I just give you a little game all the way from Wimbledon? I always keep the Gordon Bennett one and the strawberries up the sleeve because it does kind of get rid of everybody. But I really would have thought that some of the people who've heard me talk before would have remembered those two answers. Yes. Right. So I just wonder if there's anybody who's got any questions that they would like to ask. Absolute silence. Hello, at the top, yes.
Yeah, thank you. The Lawn Tennis Association have a large sum of money which they raise from various things. Do you not think it is extremely disappointing that, apart from Andy Murray, who's been our best player for about 5 or 6 years, we've got hardly any player in the top 100. Yet countries like Serbia and Croatia have probably got 4 or 5. That's a pretty poor indication of what the Lawn Tennis Association have been doing.
So when you're talking about all the money that we've got from raising things, do you know where we get the money from?
Clubs, individuals, I don't know.
Right,
Sponsorship.
the income that we get is the profit after all expenses from Wimbledon. And although it's a large sum of money, it has to cover everything. And we have got 4 men in the top 100 at the moment, and we've got 3 women, which you might say is absolutely pathetic. And we've got a good base behind them. And when you talk to the people from places like Russia, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan and so on, they will say that they're probably in the top because they wanted to get out. Whereas for our players, people will complain that our players aren't hungry enough. They are as hungry enough as they can possibly know how to be hungry. But they haven't had to live in a war-torn country like Novak did in Serbia and have to play well enough to get out of the country to live a better life. Maybe we try and do too many things. Maybe we try and be too many things for everybody. Should performance be our remit? Should we be producing the top players? Or should we be providing the opportunities for kids and people to play tennis? It's an argument in discussion, but I can understand because the media, if you talk to people like Simon Briggs from The Telegraph, they don't talk about these good stories about the Parks programmes. They will only talk about Andy Murray losing. And we say, well, why don't you talk about the good things? Because they're not sexy, they don't sell the papers. So unfortunately, trying to tell the good stories is very difficult. But yes, I can understand how you would feel, the fact that people say we've got an awful lot of money. Peanuts compared with some of the governing bodies, but we do try hard. But if you've got some good ideas, do please come and tell me. But I appreciate the question entirely.
Soccer's my sport, not tennis, I'm afraid.
No, that's fine. And then we talk, I shouldn't say, a whole different ball game, but it is different. The money in football is, I suppose I look at some of the footballers who are earning so much money and I just wonder if it's right. But I won't go down in that route right now. Is there anybody? Hello.
When you changed the rules about the last set
Yes.
in Wimbledon, was it a unanimous or easy decision?
It was. For the last 3 years, Tim Henman chairs a committee called the Tennis Committee, and they discuss all the rules like the wild card, seeding and so on. So we knew that over the last few years this question would come up ever since the Nicholas Mahou-John Isner match. And the Grand Slams can modify their structure according to what they want, whereas the tour has to do what the ATP or the WTA say. So the discussion was all about the welfare of the players and their lifestyle, because if you'd played like Kevin Anderson did in his semi-final, and he had to give everything for that match, even though he knew that if he won he was going to have to play the next day, do you keep something in reserve in case of tomorrow and then lose? So it was all about the welfare of the players. But then the discussion was, do you play what's called a championship tie at 10, or do you play a short set? Do you play at 6 all? Do you play at 9 all or 12 all? And we thought that 12 all was like playing an extra set, and that was a nice easy cut-off. So when they go on the court, they know that if they get that far, it will end when they play the tiebreaker 12 all. Yes, and it was unanimous.
Seems a sensible thing.
Yes.
That match was fantastic, wasn't it?
Yes.
But for the people who were watching, it was brilliant.
Yeah. Yes. I felt sorry for the chair umpire in the John Isner match because he wasn't allowed to go to the toilet. But he's made a lot of money on that one. And in fact, in terms of chair umpires, they don't have a very easy life. And you'll have seen Carlos Ramos, who suffered at the hands of our friend Serena. And I think what was extraordinary was, although she was supported on the day for what she did, the feelings afterwards was that she was completely inappropriately behaved, that you just don't say things. And then to say, but I'm a mother, I don't cheat. I mean, the men were saying, well, can they say, well, I'm a father, I don't cheat. Yeah, but they have to be so calm and collected on the court, and they really are an amazing bunch of people. And there are quite a few officials from Shropshire who actually travel the world now as line judges and chair umpires, which is lovely to see. And my first year on centre court with the trophy, the line judges line up by the net, and we'd given all the trophies out, and then we'd walk along behind the Duke of Kent to chat to the people on the net. And 2 of the boys I taught at Shifnal were actually the team leaders that day on the net. So as you go past, I won't tell you what they said to me, but anyway, you go past. To me, that was one of the best moments of all the 6 years I had, was seeing the kids that I taught, you know, doing so well on centre court, which was lovely. Anything else from anybody? Yes?
Probably not an appropriate question, but who's your money on, given that Big over Andy playing Wimbledon this year? Who's your money on as a good player for Britain?
It's an interesting, because Novak is playing so well, but having lost this last week, Roger lost last night, and Rafa's got a knee that doesn't work. But there are some wonderful young men, but there's probably a group of about 6 of them who could actually win Wimbledon. But to win a Grand Slam, it means you've got to play so well for a fortnight, and they're so used to playing week by week that a fortnight's a big ask. And the girls, when an unseeded player won yesterday, and all the other girls, some people would struggle to name the top 10 women. Jo Conter, our lovely Jo, she can play absolutely extraordinary tennis, and then the next day not. But how many of us have bad days? You know, but we expect these sports people to be amazing every single day, and it doesn't work like that, does it? I mean, I'm bad on a good day, let alone good on a bad day. Yeah. Anybody else? Right. Thank you, Robin.
Cathie, thank you very much for such an interesting and funny, amusing talk. Sport's such a great leveller, and perhaps if more of our young people were involved in tennis or any sport, we wouldn't have the need for our last speaker, the street pastor, who told us about some of the youth on the streets and the troubles that they got into. I'm a tennis player, still playing league tennis, and the average age of our team is around the 70 mark. So I could be very interested in the World Championships for the over 90s. Excellent. We have twin grandchildren of 12 and a half, and they play tennis, and they thrash the pants off my partner and I now. I'm also very pleased that the roof is on the number 1 court, having vowed never to go to Wimbledon again if I had tickets for that court, having spent the last time we went in the rain, in and out of the restaurants, and not hardly seeing a ball being played. Anyway, Cathie, it was a great talk.
Thank you.
and I think even non-tennis players would be really appreciative of it. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.